Well, here it is again, guys. It's 2024, and the post-halving crypto bullet train is at the station. All of us in Cardano are getting ready to board before that bullet train takes off at a speed that is unbelievable to most people. But don't forget, this is not just about what's about to happen is not just about the halving cycle. There's also someone waving a very powerful magic wand that's going to help us along, not because they like us. In fact, they seem to hate us, but they have to do it to save themselves. If you think it's highly inappropriate for me to be talking about Janet Yellen's wand, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. We are now post halving, and for the last several months, we have all been inundated with people talking about this. Even though everyone knows what this is, we've all used this, and every single crypto YouTuber has used this to stimulate dopamine production in our brains because we sit and fantasize about what all of this means. And we know there have been previous halving cycles. We had a halving in November 2012, in July 2016, and in May 2020. And we also know that something like 12 months or 17 months or 18 months after those halving events, fabulous and wonderful things happen that allow you to imagine the event of purchasing a Moon Cybertruck, a Moon Lambo, that house on the beach, whatever it is you fantasize about that makes those dopamine chemicals flow in your brain. This is the big promise of crypto that makes us all so happy, that forces us to DCA if we're good and not not squander all of our little ducats on useless things like alcohol and partying and all those kind of things. Those are good too. Those are good too. I'll admit I'm a fan of those things too. But if you're in crypto, you probably fantasize about these things happening every about 4 years. But we often think of crypto as being this sort of island unto itself. And this is totally separate than the Cardano island, the pond, and the ocean metaphor, but just a normal island. Crypto is an island, and this is all that matters. And the whole this is the original sort of promise and ethos of crypto. The whole world eventually was going to adopt crypto because central banks manipulate fiat currencies to the detriment of the average person. That's been the whole talking point the entire time I've been in crypto. And I got in sometime like in this little zone over here, I think maybe just before this 2012 halving event, and watched it do this. And I think I started buying down around here. I remember the day we were at this point right here when Bitcoin was under 100, was under 200 bucks. I remember that day very distinctly. But this isn't all that's really going on. It turns out that crypto has been exceptionally lucky. If you really believe in the foresight of Satoshi Nakamoto, you might say that Satoshi planned it out this way. But however it's happened, crypto, all of us in crypto, including us in Cardano, have been exceptionally lucky because every time we've had one of these halving events, something else very, very important happened around the same time. It happened contemporaneously, and it caused someone else, someone completely outside crypto, to do something that is very helpful to us on the crypto bullet train, very helpful to us at producing those very high velocities that we all like so much. Here is that other very important event. And if you just glance over this table, you'll immediately know these are US presidential elections. And notice the dates. Remember, I said the Bitcoin halving events took place in 2020, 2016, 2012, and again now in 2024. What do we have here? 2012, 2016, 2020, and we all know what happens in November of 2024. Yes, these are presidential elections. And maybe most importantly, in a dual party system like in the US, what happens is one party will be in the White House. That administration, that party will be controlling the executive branch of the US government. That means all kinds of jobs for their cronies. All of their little buddies get all the good jobs in DC where they don't really have to do much. They can just kind of pretend like they're doing stuff for 4 years. And as long as they are good little helpers, they get to keep those jobs and they basically can't be fired. Very difficult to be fired. This is a great thing for a lot of people in these political parties that help out the administration. So we already know. So, whenever you're thinking, you're like, okay, everybody knows presidential election happens every 4 years. Maybe it just happens to line up, with the Bitcoin halving cycle. Maybe Satoshi was really smart and somehow he predicted, how fast the blocks would be mined, and he had this all mapped out in his head, a little help from luck, but whatever you believe about that. It turns out this is mapped up pretty closely to these elections. And I know you're thinking, hey, you're going to start talking about macro stuff. You're going to start talking about the Federal Reserve and the FOMC and the owl. You're going to start talking about how they always try to help out the economy in an election year. But then you're going to counter that. You're going to say, but Jerome Powell has already told us he's not going to help out. And he mentioned this as recently as the FOMC presser this week. He got the question, like he always does, are you going to do things to help out the economy, in the name of politics, to help out the current administration? And Jerome Powell, every single time, says, no, I am not. He talks about how horrible and terrible and unethical that would be. And he always mentions that politics have never been a talking point for anyone at the Fed. And, he's pretty convincing when he says that. So your next question should be, okay, why should we care about these presidential elections? So here's the other thing. There is more than one way for an administration to help out the economy to make it more likely that their party will be reelected. And it doesn't matter if this is the first term, like it is now for the Biden Harris administration, or if it's the second term, because that party still wants to get reelected. They still want to control the executive branch so that they get all the jobs. They still want that, even if the current president and vice president are out of there. So they still want to help out. If the Federal Reserve isn't going to help out, though, they have another person. If Jerome Powell won't help them out, they have another person who will help them out, who must help them out, because you're probably aware the Fed isn't a governmental agency. If you've read all the stuff about Jekyll Island, all those kind of things, it's not like Treasury. But Treasury is one of those agencies, one of those departments. It's a department. It's one of those departments where the president gets to appoint the Secretary of the Treasury. That means Janet Yellen definitely has to do what's best for the administration. And just as of today, or the last couple days, it looks like she's already started doing exactly that, because as of the Fed FOMC meeting presser last week, it looked like they weren't going to get any help yet from Powell. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but they'll get a little bit of help starting this summer from the Federal Reserve, but they need to start helping now if they want Uncle Joe to get reelected. So, of course, they turn to Grandma Janet Yellen and her magic wand. So here it is right on the Treasury website. It's only May. It's only May. We've still got a ways to go until the election. But after last week's presser with Jerome Powell, I think Janet Yellen knew they had to get busy if there's any chance of her chosen party retaining the White House. So here we go. Today, Treasury is announcing the launch of its buyback program and is releasing a tentative buyback schedule. Buybacks up to $2 billion per week, according to this announcement. Here's the actual schedule. You can see the $2 billion going out into the ecosystem during these periods over here. And what are they calling all this? They're calling it, in each case, liquidity support. The difference between us in crypto and normal people is probably that we understand little buzz terms like liquidity support. And that's because projects do things like this all the time to prop up their ecosystems. So we kind of understand what's actually going on here. Here's one post about this. US Treasury announces first Treasury buyback operation since 2002. I didn't say 2022, I said 2002. The US Treasury is launching its first buyback program since 2002, scheduled to start on May 29. The program is designed to improve liquidity in the Treasury market. During this period, Treasury plans to hold weekly liquidity support buybacks, $2 billion per operation, up to $500 million allocated for Treasury inflation protected securities. In my opinion, this is a bank bailout. No surprise here. We know when you say liquidity support, what you really mean is you're pushing liquidity into the system. And a lot of people will use another term to describe this. Here's Adam Back, who some suspect may actually be Satoshi. I'm not necessarily in that camp, but Charles is. Adam Back says, sounds like QE by another name. And a lot of people are going to be saying this as soon as they realize what's going on, because they couldn't really do quantitative easing again. The first time they did quantitative easing, it was great because nobody knew what they were talking about. Nobody had any idea what that was. It was a bunch of mumbo jumbo. But now we all know, we all hear the words quantitative easing, and we know they're basically printing money. They're injecting liquidity. Somebody on X today described this as Treasury being like a burn address. And in exchange for sending your tokens to be burned, they're going to print some new money and give you money in exchange for those old tokens. It's not a terrible comparison here, but what's going to end up happening is you're going to have monies injected into the ecosystem. They're trading in these securities, those are going away, and they get new monies. This is Janet Yellen doing her job, working for the White House, waving that wand and making the economy better at a cost. At a cost. Because we all know this quantitative easing thing, this liquidity support, anytime you're injecting money into the ecosystem, what happens is the holdings of the average person get devalued. The US and the entire world have been playing this game for a long time. We all know how this works. And fortunately for us in crypto, this seems to have been highly beneficial for assets like crypto, assets like tech stocks, all these kinds of things in terms of how much they're valued in that ever inflating fiat currency. So, why do they need to do this again? Well, we have a measure. We have sort of a measure. We have many measures of how much money is sort of in the ecosystem, but maybe one of the most accessible ones is M2. We've talked about exactly what goes into M2 on this channel in the past. We won't go into that right now. But the important thing is when we're talking about how much money is in the ecosystem, this chart kind of tells the story. We were on sort of a very gradual rise. There were a few bumps like this one right here, 1990, but it was just all sort of gradual. And then we hit the great financial crisis and things start rapidly accelerating. We get to COVID and we get this crazy vertical wall. It goes from something like 15 trillion way up above 20 trillion. That was in 2020. You'll remember this was also when Cardano went from very low values. I remember in 2018, I was buying Cardano for like 3 cents. And then after the 2020 halving in the altcoin bull cycle. Subsequent to that, Cardano went up above $3. Went from 3 cents to $3 between sometime in like 2018 till after this happened. We had both things going on. We had the Bitcoin halving cycle that affects all of crypto, and we also had the government waving the magical monetary policy wand that makes the amount of money in the ecosystem go from this up to this. And this is what they've done anytime there's been any trouble or they need to get reelected. Here's the Fed balance sheet. You can tell last time we did it through the Fed balance sheet. The Fed balance sheet was a giant tool to make this happen. You can see 2020, the amount of M2 goes from here to here. The Fed balance sheet goes from here to here. This is, like I said, one great analogy somebody made today is this is like having a burn address where you send in all the old tokens and you get brand new fresh money straight out of the printer instead. This is a great way to inject money into the ecosystem. Would Austrian economists or even myself agree that this is a good idea? Not at all. Does it seem to be fantastic for assets like crypto? Yes, it does. So, why do they keep doing this? If Austrian economists and pretty much all of us in crypto say this is such a terrible thing to keep inflating and debasing the currency, why does it keep happening over and over again? Surely it can't just be to get their party reelected by stimulating the economy. Well, that's probably part of it. But also, we have another, maybe much bigger problem, and that's the national debt, and particularly the interest payments on the national debt. Balaji in this post points out that those interest payments look like this. You can see from 90 to 2005-ish, there things are looking okay. Then we have the housing crash and things get a little crazy. Then we get to 2020. You remember 2020 was that giant vertical wall in M2 and the Fed balance sheet. In 2020, the Fed interest payments go crazy until they're clear up here in February 24, 1.1 trillion. Remember, if we look back here, we're looking at like 400 billion in 2020. Now, 4 years later, we're at 1.1 trillion. It's crazy because we did some crazy spending stuff. But look what happens, and here's the main point that Balaji's making is look what happens just between February 2024, so a couple months ago, till the end of this year. So if if the Fed were to cut rates, then we only go to here. But if the Fed just keeps rates where they are, which is exactly what they did last week, those interest payments go clear up to here. All of a sudden, we're at 1.6 trillion. And you probably see a lot of headlines where people really on both sides of the aisle are talking about how this is completely untenable, completely unsustainable, and this whole thing's going to blow up. Balaji describes it like this: the first 30 years is where our intuition was tuned, but over the last 3 years, payments have been rising at 15x. Put another way, 7 years now is 105 years in the old world. It will happen fast. And of course, this all feeds into kind of the central thesis of all of us in crypto, and especially the original thesis of Bitcoin. And that's that this debasement of currency, as the Austrian economists have always predicted, this debasement of currency was untenable, eventually would blow up, and that would make the value of things like quality cryptos that have a reasonable issuance policy go insane. We'd go to these stratospheric levels. But it also means that the federal government has to do something about this. So if the Fed is not going to do this, if they're not going to cut by 150 basis points so that the interest payments only go to here, they've got to do something else. And I'm not saying they're not going to do that, but they definitely need to do it this week. So they've got to do something else to debase the currency to make this, wherever we end up, between here and here or anywhere else above this line, right, this point right here, this February 2024 figure, we could do something else. They've got to do something else to debase the currency to make these interest payments easier to make. Like I always say, nobody really knows what's going to happen in any market, and crazy black swan events could happen, or black swan events might not happen, and it just turns out that everybody's wrong. Things change suddenly, seemingly for no reason. But if everything goes like it has in the past, and whether it's just Grandma Janet with her magic wand, or if the owl helps her out, it looks like it's going to be party time for the party boys and party girls in crypto, including in Cardano. We'll probably all be posting a lot of memes like this one from Senator Lummis, hopefully about ADA and Cardano and not about Bitcoin, though. Luckily, this is all going to be happening at a fantastic time for Cardano. Why? Because we have two very big things, several very big things coming up in Cardano, but two we're going to talk about today. The first of those is Ouroboros, Laos, and input endorsers. This is relevant to the scaling part of the blockchain trilemma of decentralization, security, and scaling. Security on Cardano has been fantastic compared to the robbery forest over there in EVM land. Decentralization has been fantastic. More on that in a second. Scaling has been something we've all probably wanted more of, and input endorsers seems to be this incredible scaling solution. We've talked about this many, many times on this channel. Charles just did a video about it literally 2 days ago, so you can go back and watch his video. He does a very nice whiteboard version where he explains it. It's you might remember it as the weird heartbeat thing where we have the constant heartbeats like bum, 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 and then a big heartbeat, boom, bum, 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 boom. Watch Charles's whiteboard video if you don't know how input endorsers are going to work. But it seems like an incredible breakthrough in blockchains. And people have done similar things, but this seems to be an excellent way to achieve sustainable scaling. That brings us to the second gigantic thing that's going to be happening in Cardano very, very soon. And that's the chain hard fork that's going to bring us Voltaire. That is governance. Governance by the people of Cardano for the people of Cardano. This is going to be something that I would say no blockchain of the level of prominence of Cardano has ever achieved. Blockchains have tried this before, usually with terrible results. You'll remember that EOS had its own constitution, and there was this whole governance thing, and they did their ICO, which was like $4 billion or something, and that obviously didn't work out because nobody talks about EOS anymore. Cardano is going to do it differently. And that's going to decentralize one of the last things in Cardano that needed to be decentralized, and that's governance of the ecosystem. It'll truly, fairly be in the hands of all of us. All of us who hold ADA will have a say in what happens in Cardano. Decentralization is something we're already excellent about, but people freaked out a little bit this week about decentralization in Cardano because the Edinburgh Decentralization Index released their tokenomics dashboard. And when you just pulled it up and you looked at it, it looked like this. So you saw Nakamoto coefficient, you're like, oh, sweet. Cardano is excellent in terms of Nakamoto coefficient. Let's see how we're destroying the competition. Then you pull it up and you see this. You see us being excellent like you're used to until February 2021, and then a nosedive, and then we're like almost the worst. You look at some of the other metrics, not looking so great. Look at some of the other ones, again, not great. Not good. Cardano not looking good on any of these metrics. And a lot of people were asking, what happened? I thought we were great in terms of decentralization. Here's the deal. We are great, but you need to know how to use this dashboard. When it says 1,000 here, that means they're only looking at 1,000 Cardano holders, 1,000 ADA holders, 1,000 entities in the ecosystem. You want to go to a threshold of none so that it shows everything, the entire ecosystem. That's really what we're interested in. I have no idea why EDI doesn't make this the default. I have a feeling they will in the future because this is how you see the real numbers. When you hit apply thresholding right here, all of a sudden you see the actual reality, and that's that Cardano was doing fantastic up until this point in January, February 2021. And then we started doing Beyond excellent, crushing even harder until today, or at least until when was that? April. I think we had an April 30th date at one point here. I'm kind of moving my cursor around. But yeah, this goes out to about April 30th. And of course, Cardano is destroying everyone in terms of Nakamoto coefficient. As you would expect, we're also killing it in everything else. You'll notice that some of these you want to be the lowest, some of these you want to be the highest. Like on Gini coefficient, you want to be the lowest. Values close to zero indicate equality. Shannon entropy, you want to be the highest. A higher value of entropy indicates higher decentralization. Till index, values close to zero indicate equality, and Cardano is the lowest. We're always no pun intended, the teal line, the aqua colored line. And Cardano is killing it once again. I know everybody freaked out because they didn't apply the correct thresholding on these charts. So basically, all of crypto is in this beautiful, magical, golden spot where some combination of Grandma Janet's magic wand waving and the efforts of the owl over the Federal Reserve are going to inject a lot of money into, sort of the greater economic ecosystem. And crypto in the past has been a mighty beneficiary of those kinds of things happening. On top of that, you got some fantastic things coming up in the Cardano ecosystem in particular, in terms of Voltaire and input endorsers. So unfortunately, while all of that's happening, which are all great things for crypto and great for Cardano in particular, there's also going to be the typical tribalism that we always get in crypto. It just ramps up during the bull cycle. Everybody should be happy during the bull cycle because things are great in crypto. But instead, what happens is the tribalism just ramps up. And you've got a lot of maximalists in the various ecosystems who are going to be constantly saying bad things about every other possible place you could be putting your money because they've got their own bags and they want you putting your money where their money is to pump their bags. In fact, you might have noticed there was quite a bit of activity around this lecture that apparently was given at some point by Michael Saylor. He's a guy who's always going to say bad things about every other single possible asset that's not Bitcoin. In this case, he was saying things like, basically every other, notable crypto asset that's not Bitcoin is going to be deemed a security and Wall Street will never accept it. Of course, people made some very valid points about this being a very uncrypto thing to say. It's like all of us always knew on this roadmap where crypto provides an alternative to these constantly debased fiat currencies. Wall Street was probably going to get interested at some point. Like Wall Street was going to figure out they could make money in crypto because a lot of money's already been made in crypto, and they're going to want in on that. We all knew it was inevitable. Is that the end goal we're striving toward? No, it is not. That's why Michael Saylor, you'll know if you were around, if you've been around crypto for a while. Michael Saylor wasn't always around. Michael Saylor is kind of a recent addition. In my opinion, that's a little bit because he's more like those TradFi guys. Like, I welcome the entry of those TradFi guys, but it's more of a side effect. It's more of something that just happens on our roadmap to providing alternative to the TradFi and fiat world. Of course, the TradFi guys are going to be interested. He's, in my opinion, he's kind of one of those guys. He has a good rhetoric game. He has really good rhetoric around crypto and everything that crypto offers. But I mean, think about it. Michael Saylor is a product of that TradFi world. He thinks like that. To him, acceptance by Wall Street probably is one of the goals. I think in crypto, that's just a side effect of the other wonderful things we're moving toward. Asking Michael Saylor about any asset other than Bitcoin, it's like asking Nancy Pelosi about whether we should be watching Fox News, CNN, or Joe Rogan. It's like asking Diddy what ingredients are okay to put in the drinks of your party guests. You're not going to get you're not going to get objective advice on these questions from any of these characters, just like you're not from Michael Saylor on Gen 3 crypto assets. So in Cardano, likewise VCs, should you should you be asking VCs for advice on the directions in which the Cardano ecosystem should be growing? If you want money in Cardano, if you want money for your project in Cardano, you're probably going to be interested in that. But should the Cardano ecosystem be worried about what VCs think? No, you're not going to get objective advice from a VC. They're going to give you advice on what they want to see, which may not be. That's probably very similar to what kinds of things Diddy would want to put in your drinks. It may not be the best thing for you. So don't worry about what all these other characters are saying and doing. They just want to make their own money. They want to pump their own bags. They want people to put their money with them in the same places they are, doing what they want you to do in exchange for their VC money, all of those things. Crypto's in a great place. Cardano has some wonderful things coming up, and it'll ride this wave right along with the rest of crypto. So don't worry about a thing. I hope you're starting out a fantastic week, and I'll talk to you soon.